everybody, welcome to Improv FAQ at Length. This is a series of longer conversations about improv topics that have lots of questions surrounding them. I'm James Quesada.
I'm Bob Wick.
And we're joined by a good friend of ours. Sorry, Miranda Fyfe.
That's me.
Hey!
Miranda, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so
Good to see you.
You are a friend of ours in the Michigan community, but you were a transplant from Atlanta improv community. And the topic of conversation for us in this episode is going to be about short form and long form improv. So I'm sure that being from moving from Atlanta to Metro Detroit will play a role in the conversation. But for starters, this is a topic that you selected to talk about. And what made you want to talk about generally short form and long form?
Well, I know some theaters here focus on like one or the other, or I guess theaters everywhere. But I know I came up learning both of them, and I guess I was just interested if, like your guys' perspective on if you came up learning one or the other, or simultaneously, one at a time. Yeah, I feel like it's something every improviser comes into contact with both at some point or another. So
yeah, for sure. And it's I think my favorite point of the conversation in the question of short form and long form is just that like some people love or hate one. Just like, and that's definitely been my experience. I feel like it's person to person in Detroit, as far as my experience has been. In New York, it's a little bit more like long form only. There's a Comedy Sports that operates in New York on a somewhat regular basis. I think maybe weekly or every other Saturday or something like that. But otherwise, it's like everybody's doing long form. Period. Bob, but Bob, you started with Second City.
Right. So, So what were we going to say? I'm sorry.
Well, and that curriculum also starts with more short form exercises. Yeah.
Yes. And honestly, like, I think because that's why Go Comedy, their curriculum is very much the same way, because that's, me and Gary, who wrote the curriculum for Go Comedy, went through the same training, and the owners of Go Comedy went through the same Second City training. So we all started with short form into long form. And so that's why you probably, so you started like that way. You started that way too, right, James? Like you.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So this is what my class experience was. I actually started coming to Go Comedy on a weekly basis to do the jams. So really Fresh Sauce, the open jam, was almost my first year of improvising was just doing that, because I was living in Ypsilanti, and that's an hour commute to Ferndale. Oh. Yeah, it's like 45 minutes to an hour depending on traffic. But like,
wow.
So there was no improv happening in Ypsi. And so, I couldn't afford to do classes and make that commute. So I decided to just go to the jam. And so I kind of got like a sample platter of short form. And at the time, Fresh Sauce included a long form segment, like a 10-minute long form set was like basically a game slot. So I got my feet wet with a little bit of long form in the jam as well. What was your training like in Atlanta, Miranda?
Yeah, where did you train?
Okay, so it's a little probably different than some people, but I actually started, my very first introduction to improv was with my college improv troupe at Georgia Tech. So it was like a student-run group, so pretty much all the improv students who had been there for a couple years would like teach workshops to the newcomers. So we would have like a pretty half and half mix of short form and long form, and then the shows we put on were also kind of split. And then when I did actually go to official classes, it was the theater I went to was only long form.
Okay.
So.
Okay. What was the name of the theater?
High Wire Comedy Co.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. But then I know Another big theater in Atlanta is Dad's Garage, and they are,
Yes.
they're almost, I think, totally short form, and then they also do like sketch stuff. So.
Yeah. And I guess we should frame the conversation. We probably should have done this at the top. Is to say what exactly we're talking about with short form and long form, in case anybody is looking for a definition.
Oh yeah.
That's a good point.
Short form, in the simplest way that I can muster, short form is generally improv games, which includes
like Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Yep, like Whose Line Is It Anyway, and it can be scenes that have a game rule to them while you're performing a scene, or non-scenic challenges where you are participating in things like charades, but as a performance game for an audience more than a party game. And then long form.
I was going to also add, most likely there's a host included, which controls when these games are played or interaction with the scene. Scenes can be paused. So that's a big difference between long form and short form, is there's usually a host involved.
Yeah. And then long form is going to be almost exclusively scenes, although there are non-scenic show elements in long form too, but it's mostly scenes with characters and a series of scenes strung together in a way that is seamless and generally without stopping to check in or getting any more influence from the audience as you go.
Yeah, and if you needed more of a refresher, James has a great video on it.
Yeah, thank you. There's a short form and long form video, but it's such a broad, vast topic that I am really excited to just talk about to dive deeper into it, because you can only say so much in it. Even if I think that's one of my longer videos, it's like 13 or 15 minutes, and it still doesn't really scratch the surface.
Cover. Yeah, well, it's hard to explain improv in general because there's so many facets to it. Like, you don't want to paint lines that aren't necessary.
Yeah.
But it's hard to explain something when can be so organic, and how do you explain a game when a game can be anything? It can be a game to sing, it can be a character game, it could be like the games that you use in transitions or heralds. Like, there's so many things. I think that was like our first conversation, James. Like, we use the word game for so many things. So A, it's hard to explain something that's completely organic, and B, we use a lot of the same terms to explain completely different things, so it can be confusing. Yeah.
My favorite thing is in an improv class where the teacher asks the question, so who knows what game is? You're never going to get the right answer.
Right. Yeah. And so let me ask you, Miranda, do you have a, it sounds like you are happy to do both short form and long form, but do you enjoy either one like a little bit more than the other, or if you had to choose, do you know where your loyalties lie?
Yeah, I think I definitely went through a period that I think maybe a lot of improvisers learning about improv go through, where you learn long form, and then you're like, oh, this is the most distinguished this is the high level improv, this is what fancy people do. So I was really in my head for a while about long form is real improv, short form's just games. But when I would say probably when I moved out to Michigan and started doing more short form again, I was like, oh wait, this is a blast. I love it. So I think long form is probably what I prefer still, but I also love doing short form because it's I don't know, different in cool ways where there's more audience interaction, which is something you don't always get so frequently and immediately in long form. So if I had to choose, I'd say long form, but I definitely have a love for both.
Yeah, PJ says short form is like video games. It's video games. You go to the arcade. You know what I mean? It's who doesn't love that?
Right? Is that wrong?
Yeah.
What about you, James? Which do you prefer? Do you have a strong? If you had to choose a side,
probably long form, but two things that I'll say about that as a caveat is that, one, I got really into pushing and progressing long form shows in with Go Comedy and Pointless, and I wanted to keep experimenting with show formats and like long form. But then I got to New York, and when it's just long form, I was like, we should put on a short form show.
Yeah.
So there's definitely, like, I don't know. I guess it depends on which one I'm getting enough of or not enough of.
For sure.
and then I will also say that with long form, I also just like to tinker with forms and the design of a show, and there's a short form relationship in doing that too that I really love. So short answer is long form, but what about you, Bob?
I think I prefer short form in a way.
Ooh.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you don't do as many showdowns as I do without loving it.
True. Yeah.
And I do. I think with the caveat of I try to make short form scenes feel as if they're a long form scene. So even though at any point, Tim K can hit the bell and I have to speak in a German accent, I want this to be as scenic as possible and actually have a story arc. So it's almost like I love long form, but I almost want to give up control a little bit more, because I think that's what people do like about long form. You're like, you're in total control. No one's telling you what to do. No one's going to hit a buzzer. Like, no one can tell you what choices you made are wrong, because everything's supposed to be, building in discovery in the moment. So like when I know I have something overhead, because I suck at accents. I don't like doing music. There's like a lot of things that I don't enjoy doing, but I do enjoy being like pimped into doing it. Like, so like it gives you a little more freedom. Like, I'm not singing in the shower because I want to, but I do want to. I'm singing in the shower because, so-and-so over here hit a bell and that's the game we're playing. So yeah,
that's part of that's what makes, I think, short form so fun too, is it like forces you to make a lot of choices you would probably never make. And then like I feel like the harder you're trying to make it a comprehensive scene, the funnier it is when it's driven totally off the rails.
Yeah, and those are my favorite short form games too. Is things like Triple Dub, which is where you would, like, each person, if we were doing Triple Dub, I would be doing Bob's voice, who would mouth along, and then we would do it as a closed loop of people mouthing each other's words. But I saw that for the first time at Go Comedy, and I felt that's when I fell in love with short form. I was like, that's funny because it's impossible to do perfectly, and that's why. That's the beauty in it, is that, like, oh, let's have fun with how hard this is.
I think there's something people don't consider or don't appreciate about some of the games we play, and I wish they would incorporate more of this kind of play into, like, the initiations they use when they start seeing, like, something like New Choice is something I like to use as just a learning exercise. Because I think people get into almost a rut or sometimes they plateau because they're making similar choices. But when you play New Choice, you usually spit out the first thing that pops in your head. Well, if you're spitting out the same thing over and over again, someone else hitting that bell like, we've heard this before. Go until you ran out every idea you possibly could think of, and then pivot from there. And they're fun. They're fun scenes. And if you do it right and you have some kind of narrative or story arc, it can be really interesting to watch, not just because, you're being pimped and there's a game element to it, but it can be a sincerely good scene.
Yeah. Yeah. Miranda, moving from Atlanta to Detroit, did you, what were some of, like, the most interesting differences and similarities in what you were doing in Atlanta and then coming to get involved at Go Comedy and everywhere else?
Sure. Well, I moved out here for work, and so I didn't know I didn't know really anything about the improv community except that, oh, there's an improv theater in the same area as my work, so I can still do improv. And I would say they're pretty similar communities, I think, as far like Atlanta. There's a handful of theaters, maybe like, at least when I was there, I like I said, kind of was mostly doing college improv for a lot of the time. So I want to put a quick disclaimer that I don't speak like really thoroughly for the improv community in Atlanta. Sure. But there are like, I would say 3 maybe big theaters, sort of like how here you've got Go,
Pointless and
Pointless. Yeah. And I would say this, like, stylistically, I didn't get here and was like, oh my gosh, they do a completely different type of improv.
It's mostly just like people might call names a different thing, or I mean, I feel like Atlanta is pretty similar. I've only been down there a couple times, but like meeting people at festivals and trying to, I try to like get some insight on what's going on in different communities, and Atlanta is a place that people compare to Detroit for a lot of reasons, in the size of the artistic community and the general vibe. So I imagine that there is a lot of parallels, and maybe even more games than you might imagine to go by the same names. But yeah, I'm sure that it's all pretty much the same thing by a different name if it's not called the same thing.
Yeah, I love like learning a new short form game and then being like, oh, that's just we call it this name.
Yeah.
That's
and so
awesome.
You came in and like pretty much immediately went to launch group auditions, goes house team, yearly audition for house team, and then that's the bureau, right?
Yes.
And so Chris Peterson is your coach, and are you guys doing a bunch of different forms? What's your experience been with form?
We've like, I guess, had a conversation about form maybe a couple times throughout our rehearsal process. I would say like the closest name for what we do might just be like a montage, but as we have like gone along, we've tried more structured things, and then I think what we have right now that I think we're all like pretty happy with is it's a montage, but what we've layered on is that we have our first scene that's kind of a group scene. It doesn't necessarily have to be everybody, and it's not quite, I would say, a group game. It's just like getting a handful of us on stage, because there's 9 of us, so it's nice to have a scene that takes advantage of our numbers.
Yeah.
And then
you guys do an excellent job of that.
Yeah. Thanks.
You're so much fun to watch. I love watching the girl.
It's been cool to see. I feel like our form has evolved kind of organically, which is nice, because then it doesn't feel like we've forced structure onto it. Because then so that first scene is, I guess, kind of the jumping off point. It's our way of, I think, broadening the suggestion. So we get our one-word suggestion, and then we do this scene, and then those are where the ideas for the set comes from. And then the other thing we've layered on is trying to roughly set the whole set in the same general location. So like the same town or the same like island, or and that's been really, I think, helpful in getting us to do more callbacks. So sort of like in a Herald where you're directly calling back to scenes before, but more loose, I guess.
Yeah, that's cool. If we can go back just a little bit, because I think this is a question I've heard a lot, and not directly to me, but just I've been adjacent to, and I think
I've overheard this question a lot.
Yeah. I listen, but I think you might have a unique perspective. Do you have any advice for anybody who's coming from a different town and going into a new town where there's improv? Like, did you have any any goals or anything when you the first time you went to go, or like, I guess, how, if someone were to ask you,
sure,
how to, become part of an improv community when you're leaving another one, what would your advice be?
I mean, I think it's pretty similar to what you do when you're just starting out improv anywhere. Like, I think almost every community probably has some sort of open jam that you can go to. So figuring out when those are. When I first moved here, I was looking up the theaters, and I went to a couple shows just to check out the community and talk to people. I think the biggest thing is I got very lucky when I moved to Michigan that the launch group audition was within like a month, and that I was fortunate enough to be cast for it. But like the contingency plan was to probably take a class or just keep going to jams, just like getting involved with the community. And I think the difference when you're coming from another place where you have improv experience that I've run into is sometimes it can be discouraging to have to restart at like a lower level. I don't know what would have happened if I'd taken classes here, but I did go, and after taking classes in Atlanta, go back to my hometown and take a class, and I was like, oh, they're making me start at level 2. And I think the biggest thing is like, don't get discouraged by that, and remember that, every new teacher, even if it's like intro to long form and you're like, I know long form already, every teacher is going to have a new perspective, and you always, like, because it's improv, you're not ever going to be doing the same exact thing. So, yeah, I think the important thing is to get involved in the community however you can.
That's awesome. Because I specifically remember you introducing yourself after, I think it was after like a Wicked Peterson set, you came up to me and like introduced yourself and tell me how you're looking to take classes and everything. I was really impressed because I just thought, that was just so, like, the way you approached everybody and everything was so just like sincere and cool, and like, yeah, it's a great, it's just a great way to meet friends, let alone other improvisers. So I thought you'd be the best person to ask about this kind of situation,
The nice thing about being familiar with a different improv community is like you kind of know that improvisers everywhere are cool people. So
yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say it is. I think mostly just about trusting that and having confidence enough to just approach people, because I've never met an improv community that wasn't inviting and accepting and happy to have a new person in town that's like, hey, do you guys want to be friends?
Yeah.
And
James,
also,
what was
I brought
it?
presents because I have influences from others. Like, oh, you call this Go Bell Go? Well, we call it Run, Hit the Bell Run, and it's gonna be
Run. Okay, cool.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
James, what was it like moving out to New York? Did you take classes out there, or?
I did not, and it's 100% a money thing. I came to New York. I now wear this as a badge of honor, but I got down to like my last $15 before I got a paycheck out here.
Wow.
So there wasn't any urge for me to be like, let me save up and buy that first $500 improv class, because they're more expensive out here too. Like, I mean, they're
well, you're in
those New York prices,
in New York.
You're in the big city now, kid.
But I was fortunate enough to have visited a lot of improv communities right before moving here, and really put to. I really got a lot of proof that every improv community is easy to connect with and approachable, and so I came in with a lot of confidence and faith in that, and so I just honestly I found the place. If I had one thing to do differently, or advice for people that are moving to like the LA's, Chicago, New York, where prices are through the roof and everything. If you're going to spend money, I would recommend doing it on going to see shows before you take your first class anywhere. Set aside a couple $100 to spend on a couple months of shows and just see shows, meet people, hang out, have a drink, talk people up, and you'll be able to figure out what place is your vibe. And so the People's Improv Theater out here reminded me the most of Go Comedy in that it is a combination of all sorts of show formats and more of a clubhouse feel. And yeah, I just connected with it. Even the like the bar design at Pitt is like the lobby bar at Go. I'm like, this feels familiar. So yeah, that's how I found my way.
Yeah, I from a guy who's never moved out of Michigan, I would also use this formula when you go to festivals, go see shows, obviously, and also take workshops. Going back to what you said before, you might have to learn zip zap zop again, but also you might meet a bunch of great friends, or interact with an interesting instructor that you normally wouldn't be able to interact with, just be stayed in Michigan like I do. So I would suggest using this formula elsewhere, not just in moving situations.
Yeah.
For sure.
What have been some of the standout shows of short form or long form that you have seen? I guess asking the three of us is talking about going to see shows and tying it in with short form and long form. Like, what are some of the standout shows that you've seen in different communities?
Well, I think about my first show. I'm thinking about my first short form show, which would have been a Damnation game back when the Inferno was still a theater. Like, that was like one of the first times I saw the games I was learning at Second City be used as an entertainment tool rather than just an exercise to get to the goal, which was long form. What about you guys?
I think the short form show that probably stands out the most to me is Dad's Garage. Has like an extreme elimination improv challenge where it's pretty similar to Pandemonium at Go, I think, where they start with like a whole bunch of improvisers and play a bunch of short form games until there's like 3 left. And I think that stood out to me probably because I got to play in it once when they were doing like a college night. So it's like in my mind there. But also just going to see it a couple times, it's there's like such an art to hosting a short form show that can like make or break it. Because I know I've seen that exact show go really well and like very poorly. So
yeah,
it stands out in both ways because of that.
Yeah. I think short form that gets a little rowdy is my favorite stuff to watch. One of the more unique two that I'll mention is one. What's the name of the guys from? I want to say Louisville.
Grandma's Kitchen. God. I'm thinking like
they're a short form trio that comes to Diff.
Yeah, yes. Rocky, Stefan, and the other gentleman.
I feel so bad that I can't come up with it. Hopefully we'll remember before we're done.
Yeah,
it's on the tip of my tongue. But they would come to Diff, and I would see them do like a 20 to 30 minute set of short form, just the three of them, and they do long games. They'll play a short form game for like 10 minutes and they'll just be on like New Choice or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe not 10 minutes, but like long, like, longer than most short form games that we do in like the Showdown or most of the short form shows that I've seen. And I thought that was really cool that like, you can have basically like a long form set or like a chunk of a show that feels long form in scenes, but always has this game rule going on.
Yeah. Oh, that makes me think of one of the shows that actually a couple of my friends put together. So I went to like a tech school, so a lot of my friends were like computer science majors. And And so they put together this code, and they called their show improvgod.exe. So they would, like, the three of them would come out and wheel, like, this giant monitor on stage that would show the code. And so then they'd start doing a long form set, but they had this code made so that it would, like, ramp up over time, but it would introduce new rules like throughout the show at random.
Oh, okay, okay. So it's like, a new rule will be displayed that they have to implement?
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
it would
awesome.
like have a sound effect and then be like, Ben speaks only in gibberish now or something.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah. And it would like take rules away and then add them, and then by like, you know, the climax of the set, there's like a million rules going on. But it was really cool and fun.
I love that. That's the kind of stuff that that gets me excited about short form, where I'm like, what's the threshold where you start to fall apart, whether you like it or not? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that one is kind of like I don't know if I would, I guess it is short form, but they definitely, like, they use short form game rules, but played it as like a long form, like mono scene, I think. So I guess there's like definitely an area where the two kind of overlap.
Totally. Yeah. And in fact, the other show that I was going to mention is a show at the Groundlings. I went to, visit my brother out who moved to California last year, and I had never been to Groundlings before, and I got to see a show called Crazy Uncle Joe. I think that's the name of it, and it's this hour-long long-form show, and the scenes in it, though, it's the fastest played show I've ever seen.
Wow.
Long-form. I you know, it was such a great show. It went over so well with the audience. It was sold out. The performers were all great, but I got fatigued on how fast they were moving, and I just started counting how many scenes they were doing in a minute. It was like 5 scenes a minute, and I was like, "What is going on?"
Wait, by then, what's your definition of a scene? Because
that's what I'm saying, though, is that like if you're doing long scenes with game rules, or you're doing like no short form rule, but like the scenes wouldn't last for more than like 2 or 3 lines. Wow. It was insane, and I thought for sure that they would either mention that. And they'd be like, okay, now in part 2, we're going to slow it down. But they took a little intermission, and they came back, and they did the exact same thing. It's just like,
wow.
That's crazy. Oh, James, the name of those guys is Damaged Goods.
Damaged Goods. Yeah.
Not Grandma's Kitchen.
Grandma's Kitchen.
I suck at names. I am horrible at names. Please don't ask me names. I don't know them ever.
Yeah, but so I think that's probably the most that's the thing that I wish people would consider more is where the overlap happens between short form and long form, and that you can get whatever you want out of either one, you know, just by kind of stretching the norms into new territory if you so choose.
For sure.
Agreed. Yeah.
I like, and yeah, like I said, I like form.
Yeah.
And that's pretty, when you detail a form enough, it can feel kind of like short formy.
Yeah, for sure. It's like long form, like the different formats, like your Heralds and Lorans, like it's just putting rules in improv, which is what short form is too. So.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. What do you get out of each one? You know, Miranda, you mentioned interaction with the audience, which I don't consider that enough. Is that like I love to play meta in long form, and part of it is because that kind of like nods on the whole room connection. And yeah, that's definitely something that's built into short form, is an ability to like build a more ongoing relationship with the audience. What are some of the other things that you guys like particularly like to get out of either one?
I know the thing that I think scared me about short form a lot when I started was like line games being just like forcing you to say something funny. Like I when I was first introduced to them, was very nervous that I was just not a funny person and couldn't make jokes. But now I kind of love line games for exactly that reason, because you can make a good joke or a bad joke, and as long as you're confident, it's all good.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's definitely, I think maybe line games is at one end of short form, and then maybe like narrative long form, and those are like maybe the opposites of the spectrum between short form and long form.
Basically like a setup and punchline game, like almost stand up versus almost a play.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I like that. I really
yeah. I like to play around with non-scenic elements in long form too, though. I mean, like character monologues, or like you ever see a JTS Brown where they do the somebody in the cast starts a monologue, and then somebody adopts the character and takes over the monologue, and then it's like a line game.
The character morph type.
Love that kind of stuff.
I've seen it where you like ring a bell to have someone come in, and then it's like, as a short form game, if you can't, like, if you make a grammatical error, or if you can't like continue the thought, then you're like eliminated.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
I think we tried a short form game once where we actually did that kind of with a stand up set. We did like a protect the line stand up.
Yeah.
And it was called Keep It Clean. And the whole point was to tell like have a corny setup for something, but then have it a build up to something that was definitely going to be R-rated or raunchy, and then have somebody tag you out at the last minute to give a clean punchline to the setup.
Well, that's funny.
Like that.
But yeah, you can take any of those things, and I think you can take just about any short form element and put it into a long form show, and you can remove just about any long form element and have it be a standalone performance game.
Yeah. I think people should learn how to just appreciate the function of things. Like, I think of changing channels, or, like, how interesting does a scene become when you have to do it in the style of the History Channel or the style of BBC? How come we're not initiating with those kind of choices? It's a strong choice. It's not that hard to do if you can plug it in halfway through your scene. Why don't you try it at the beginning? Just for variety's sake.
Yeah, I do think having experience and keeping up with both short form and long form is a good way to stay like more balanced, because a lot of the skills are really translatable in both. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we start with short form in the first place, to build the skills to do the long form,
Yeah, and speaking of that relationship with the audience, short form tends to build stage presence a little more. In long form, there tends to be a lot of emphasis on, committing to the scene and forgetting about the audience, and those are all really, really great things. But sometimes they can kind of like leave you in a place where you're not connecting with the audience as strongly as you must do in a lot of short form games. When it comes to long form, Miranda, do you prefer something a little bit more loosely structured? If you're going to do long form, you want it to be more open-ended, or do you like some structure in long form?
Sure. I think in college I was getting to a point where I was doing a lot of highly structured narrative long forms, and so when I moved to Michigan, I was a little bit sick of that, and I think I'm getting to a point where I'd be interested in doing that again, because I'm always impressed by improvised Shakespeare. I think that's one of the coolest shows.
Yeah.
But you were doing so when you say highly structured narrative, that's the kind of stuff is like very specific genres, or like I know out here there's a lot of like improvised. Julia's done like improvised Parks and Rec, or there's improvised Office, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, one of my first shows I did was an improvised Harry Potter show, which was really fun.
That's awesome. I love that.
It also played to our very geeky campus, so.
Yeah, again, that's really the open possibility of it, right? Is that like, what do you, I love about short form, and I think it's the same thing that people tend to like about genre, is that you go, I love this genre or I love this show, and I want to put it into my performance or my show. And I like that about short form, that like, you don't have to like every short form game, but I guarantee you, if you sat down and looked through the list of games, you'd be like, I love this. And it's just a matter of finding what you love and making it a rule for yourself. That's what short form really is, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
And I think, like, I think, James, you kind of mentioned this too. If you end up doing too much of one thing, I know I get sick of it. So it's back to, like, you can love short form for a couple months and then love long form for a couple months. And I think that back and forth is good. Yeah.
Bob, what about you? Are there any, like, you've played so many showdowns. And so you play a lot of the same games. Are there, like, either games in particular or forms or show formats that you get burnt out on?
You know what? The only thing I think the only short form game I ever like, I don't like playing this, is Thunderdome, because I suck at names. I can think of the information, but like just getting it from my brain to my mouth sometimes, like with a clock, it sucks. I hate that. If you want me to sit down and write down every X-Men character I can think of, done. No problem. Put me on stage and put a clock to it, I'm out. No, thank you. But my approach to like short form and long form is like, even though the game is the same or the same rules, like I play games with myself to make it different. I'm not gonna or like if I catch myself doing something I think is comfort, and sometimes it takes me a minute to realize I'm doing something out of comfort, but as soon as I do, I take that off the table. So I want to play from a place of, for lack of a better term, fear. I want to be nervous. I want to, like, what's going to come out of my mouth, because usually that's the most interesting thing I can think of, is something that slightly scares me. Like, oh, I can't believe my brain thought of that. That's awesome. And just go with it, rather than like, oh, here we go. We're playing a line game and we got dentist again. Here's my 7 favorite dentist lines. That being said, I do have a couple of good dentist lines all the time. But I feel like I wrote them and I love them and I don't mind doing that material. But I might do 2 jokes I like to go to, but for the rest of the game, I have to do at least 5 that I haven't ever done. So the balance there is, because people pay for a ticket, you shouldn't be always rehearsing on stage. Because I feel like if I take away all the material I've ever came up with, it's kind of a rehearsal. Be like, I do enjoy telling these jokes, even though they're corny uncle jokes, and sometimes it's just for me. I can admit that.
Totally. What about long form? Did you say what kind of things you get burnt out on for long form shows?
No, not really. You know what? Me and Pearson have been doing a mono scene for the last year and a half, and I don't know. Again, long as the material's different, long as the shows to me feel like they're different, I don't mind like having just a shorthand with Pearson. Like, oh, obviously we're not going to edit. That's cool. And if I don't have to think about it, that's even better. I think if it was to the point where you're playing one of those, like the triggered sets where something happens, like if I had to do that every week, I think I would love it at first and then get kind of burnt out of it, because those kind of rules interfere with, not interfere, but I guess like they're a hindrance at a point. They can be a little, it can weigh on you a little bit. So I think that kind of improv would kind of weigh down on me. But overall, like, I just love playing. So like, as long as I get to be on stage, I'm really fucking happy. That's your favorite game, be on stage. Be on stage, like, there's a spotlight on me. I'm okay. What about you, James? Do you have a no bueno game. Like, oh man.
Yeah, honestly, I hate flock dancing. This is a game where you're in a trio and one person is downstage and music plays, the person downstage dances, and the two people behind just mirror those dance moves. And I get why people love it, but to me, it's like, what am I doing? This is like the closest thing to stripping that I'll ever get to. You know what I mean? Like, I'm literally just dancing. There's nothing. There's no challenge element to it.
Do you have a preference between being the dance leader or the follower?
No. That's a good question. Yeah.
No, I have a preference of leaving the room until it's over.
Oh my god, that's so interesting to me because like you are such a physical performer when you like you. I know I mentioned this a couple of times. I've watched you warm up and you just like look at your shoulder and just.
Yeah.
Oh, because the other one, like, that's a James warm up.
It's like, but you know what you'll never see me do is dancing at a party. Like,
that's true. That's true. I've been wedding some yet.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. There's that, and then I agree with you, Miranda, that if narrative is just something that I don't think I'm good at it, and I think I easily get burnt out on like genre tropes or motifs. Mm-hmm. I didn't get to a place working with it where I could keep it feeling fresh. Yeah, it just got me stuck.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. Well, assuming that we're able to get through this and get back on stage whenever it is that we're able to, what are some of the things that you're looking forward to? Either forums that like have been on your mind, or like games that you find yourself wishing that you had a virtual way of doing. Like, are there any that stand out?
I'm definitely looking forward to playing with the Bureau again. I miss that so much.
Totally.
I think, like I kind of mentioned, I'm at a place where I think I'd like to try more narrative formats, and I'd also like one of my improv New Year's resolutions was to try like more mono scene stuff, because I feel like I haven't really tapped into that much at all, just because I think I'm usually playing in larger groups, and I think mono scenes are easier with less people.
Yes.
But those are my goals for when the world resumes.
Yeah. Right. We've been talking about how I feel like physicality is going to be a thing that like hopefully there's more of when we get back to being in a room together. Is like people have been doing making some really cool things happen on over Zoom, but there's only so much you can do. So I hope that people scratch that itch, and that's what I'm looking forward to is just taking advantage of that real people in the real room. How can you engage that audience relationship? How about you, Bob?
I'm with you. I just can't wait to get back in front of an audience.
Favorite game, being on stage. Yeah,
my favorite game. Like,
it needs that spotlight.
I do. You know what? I miss the prep. I love doing showdowns. Like that's that's never been a secret. I miss, getting ready for it, getting warmed up, going to the theater, seeing everybody, I always have at least one glass of whiskey before it, doing my routine, checking in with everybody, starting to see the house fill, with people, starting to get slips. So getting ready, thinking about, oh man, we haven't came up with our team yet because we never do it ahead of time. Getting that already, just get it out there. The music hits, we go out there and just interacting with people, just all that. I also miss playing with Chris. I really miss doing our 2-man. So it's like I miss just being on stage and just coming up with something on the spot. So yeah. I want to get back to that.
Yeah. Man, you mentioned we'll wrap it up here because we're at the cap for this episode, but we should have a conversation about you mentioned coming up with a team in the showdown. you know, you have a theme for your team of 3 people, and you introduce yourselves on this theme or whatever, and you do these bits, and it's this weird middle ground between like it's not scripted or you kind of decide what you're going to say, but like it's just this little yeah, it's a bit, and I think there's stuff like that is an interesting kind of outlier from even long form and short form, because it's not long form, short form, or sketch really. It's just like quickly coming up with a plan and then executing something with a bit of an idea, but you know what I mean. So maybe
Mariah, did you just play your first showdown like right before the world changed?
I did. I squeezed it in. Yeah.
How'd it go?
It went pretty well. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Cool. Well, yeah.
I heard you crushed, so that's awesome. I'm not surprised. Nice. You're really fun to watch. I always enjoy your performances. I'm bummed I didn't get to see your showdown, but I've always enjoyed everything you've done with the Bureau. So yeah.
Thank you. You know, I'll work up to. I'll catch up to you on showdown someday, maybe.
Oh, good luck.
50 years from now, yeah. Well, it was really great to talk to you, Miranda, and thank you for talking with us. Before we let you go, is there anything in the virtual world that you're doing with either Improv or just on social media that you want to plug?
I know I did a little just virtual improv with True Colors not too long ago, so I think that is up and available. So check that out. And then whenever things go back to normal, come see the Bureau at Go Comedy.
Absolutely. Well, great.
They're great.
Yeah, they are. They really are.
I've only been able to see you a couple times, but both shows have been really, really great. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll hope to talk to you again soon. Glad you're doing well. We'll catch you next time on Improv FAQ at length.
Good to see you guys. Bye.
Bye.